right, so I'm gonna record right now. So what was I gonna do? I just drew a blank. So on Tuesday, where am I at? Let's get started. We covered a lot of material. So this morning, we're just gonna kind of do a quick overview, a quick review of variables, data types, functions, control flow, iteration, pretty much that. So a quick open. So July 9th. I'm gonna create that. So if you don't remember everything from on Tuesday, that's totally okay. I'm just gonna quickly run through variables. So let's talk about variables again. So variables, there's 3 ways to declare a variable. There's the let keyword, so let a equals 2, and you always let a followed by space the name of the variable, so like name of variable, and then followed by the equal sign. That's you're making like a declarative, like, hey, this is going to equal this variable name, and followed by the variable's value. So there's 3 ways to declare a variable: let, var, pi, and const. Pi equals 3.14. So that's how you declare variables. I'm going to move this one up. Whoop. So the var keyword, that's very rarely used anymore. So generally speaking, use let and const going forward. What else?
Would you be able to zoom in on that a little bit, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Better? Perfect. Awesome. So we have variables. What else do we have? Values. That's pretty much data types. Let's go through some data types real quick. Data types. We have let number or some, let's say age equals like 25. So that's a number. Let first name. We have a string variable like Tom, and there's 3 ways to write strings. There's the single quotes, middle name. There's the double quotes. And then there are what is known as backticks. Whoop. So single quotes, double quotes, backticks. This is specific to string interpolation. So you can write variables within there. We haven't really done that yet, but we will get into that at some point. So there's strings, numbers, strings, and then we have let child name equals undefined. So that's undefined variable type. Let no value equals null. We have the null data type. We have let array of names. So we have an array, Tom, Gus, Meryl, Noah. And the array data type is literally followed by square brackets, followed by a value. This could be a variable, it could be a string, it could be a number, it could be an object, it could be also an array. And then it's comma separated. So all the values in an array are comma separated, followed by a closing square bracket. And some object, we have an object that has a key of like say, first name, and then followed by the value. And all key values are separated by commas. So we have a first name is the key, followed by a colon, followed by the value, followed by a comma if there's multiple keys inside of an object. So like title, instructor, date, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So like say time, it's like 1300, just random data. And then the very last element inside of an object does not have an ending comma. It's just straight like that. So does anybody have any questions about any of this, any of the data types?
Question, Tom.
Yep.
For in an object, the keys, does it affect if they're in quotation marks or not?
No, not really. I mean, in some cases they do. I've seen, I think in some languages, but in JavaScript it doesn't. So I can have easily done that and it would have been the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
However, it does matter if you want a key to be like a number. Like you can't do that. So you're going to have to make that a string if you want keys to be equal like a number type of value, which is very rare that you would do that. All right, let's get down to functions. Quickly, functions. So functions are like the building blocks of any language. They're called functions. They're also called methods, depending on the language you're speaking of. They're all the same thing. Functions. Functions are literally just blocks of code that execute specific instructions for the computer. And you create a function by initialize the keyword function, followed by the function name, some like add to values, followed by the function name, followed by open parentheses and closing parentheses. And then inside of the parentheses, you can pass in parameters. Parameters are just named variables that they're named variables for whatever you pass into the function as an argument. So I can say like num1, num2, and now I can like return num1 plus num2, or I can even say let answer equal num1 plus num2 and return the answer. Either of those ways I was just kind of doing it are correct. Functions always return a value of something, or yeah, it always returns something. So if you just do like, oh, I want to know, if you just say like console log answer, that is not the correct way to do it, because console log literally just like logs whatever is inside the curly or inside the parentheses to the console over here on the right. So it's just like a visual tool to let the user know what is being output, but from the computer standpoint, it's not actually returning anything. And the whole point of function is to return values to the computer and then do something with them. So we need to return the answer in that return statement. Does anybody have any questions about the function? And so, go ahead.
I have one. So when in reference to the parameters, do you have to name the parameter the same name as your variable that you're passing in?
No. So the variable, like let age equals 50, I can say, and then like say, let retirement equals, what is the retirement age? 65 or 70 now?
67.
67, there we go. So I can say add two values. Now this function doesn't make any sense with what I'm actually doing.
Right.
Like adding the age and retirement, like why would anybody want to do that? But just for instruction purposes, then you can just pass in age and then retirement. So now the value of age is 50, but in order to access that value throughout the function, you access the name of the parameter that you put, like what it's called when you initially declared the function.
Roger.
So
Okay.
num1 references the age throughout the function. Num2 references the retirement throughout the function. Now we are going to get into naming variables and parameters once we actually start into today's materials, but yeah, you don't have to call it the same as the variable that you're passing it in.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. So that's one way we can declare a function. And there's another way, which is new in ES6, the newer way of declaring a function, which is known as a fat arrow function. So you can literally say, let add 3 values equals, followed by the parentheses, and pass in any parameters you want to pass in. So num1, num2, num3, so I'm adding 3 values inside the parentheses, and then equals open, what was that called again? Open something? Open arrow, followed by the curly braces.
Angle bracket.
Angle bracket, thank you. So equal sign, angle bracket. This sign, this thing, essentially is the same thing as saying like function. So we do open brackets, and we can say let answer equals num1 plus num2 plus num3. Then just return answer. And I should do a better job at including the semicolons at the end of sentences. It's not required anymore, but just a good habit for me to get into because that's what I learned and I want to keep things consistent. So we can say add 3 values, 1, 5, 4, 7, and then it would return the answer. All right. What questions do you have about functions, declaring a function, returning values from functions, parameters, or anything? All right. So the next, I believe it was control flow, if I don't recall, operators. We have operators. We're not going to go through them all, but just going to make sure we cover the main stuff. We can do control flow, like if else statements. If I write a function, old enough to drink, I pass in an age. Whoop. I pass in the age. I can say, if age is greater than or equal to, so that's where we get a condition statement, 21, I can say return, enter, or I can go to the bar, else, return, go home. So this is control flow, and like if else statements, there's else if statements. So like, I'll just call this old enough. And so if there's age is over 21, I can say age is 35. I can run for president. Else, if age is greater than or equal to 21, I want to return. I can go to the bar, and else return go home. So if the age comes in here, if age is greater than or equal to 35, I can run for the president. Else, if the age is greater than or equal to 21, I can go to the bar. Else, I'm just going to go home. So it's a control flow in addition to conditional statements. All right. So if I say like old enough, say 20 or 31 and execute it, probably gonna get an error somewhere. Age is 50. Should comment that out. Comment that out. Comment all that out. Where did that go? So there's an error somewhere. So if you read the actual traceback error, so it says home run, whatever, index.js, that's the file. Index.js line 19, syntax error, unexpected token. So there's an unexpected curly brace somewhere. I see it right here on line 19. I didn't comment that one out. So that should fix it. If I run it, old enough, I'm passing in 31 into the age parameter as an argument. And now I can access age and run through that. What questions do you have about control flow and or conditional statements? All right. What else do we have? We have for loops. So iterations. If I have to do something over and over again, I can say like function does name exist? And for example, I'm going to pass in an array. Let array of names equals, where did that? So up here, I can copy that, come down here. If I pass in array of names or some array, but it should be like a names array and some name. I can say what I want to do is I'm going to pass in this names array into this names parameter as an argument. I'm going to pass in a name and say let some name equals say Meryl. And what I want to do is see whether or not this name exists in this names array. So I'm going to see if this some name, which is Meryl, exists in this array of names. So I can do what is known as a for loop. So I initiate it with a for keyword by curly open parentheses and closing parentheses. And inside the parentheses, it takes in 3 statements. It could take in more, it could take in less, but 99.9% of the time, you'll always declare 3 statements. And you're gonna say, what's the initial value? So you're gonna declare an initial variable. So let I equals 0, because we wanna start at the 0 index of the array. Arrays have index 0, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm gonna say, as long as I is less than the names dot length. So this is just the length of the array that I'm passing in. So as long as I is less than this length, continue executing the code, followed by semicolon. And after every time it runs, I want to increment the I variable by 1. And I can do plus equals 1, or I can do a shorthand plus plus. And now I do open brackets, and it automatically does it closing bracket as well. Click enter to go on a new line, and now it's indented. Now I can say like if, so now I'm doing a control flow or if statement. If the value at a certain index equals the name, then return true. Otherwise, let's return false. So at the names, the value at the names at this specific index, if it equals the name, which is Meryl, I can say return true. Otherwise, so if it goes into this if statement, if this doesn't turn true, it completely skips this part on line 57, and then it comes down to line 58, and there's nothing else to do. So it jumps back into the for loop, increments I by 1. So now I equals 1 right here. So 1 is less than names dot length, which is 1 less than 4. Yes, then it just keeps on going through. So I can actually console log I as well as names the value at that index. If it goes through this entire array without finding a match right here, it'll break out of that for loop once it gets to the end. And then I'm just going to return false. So if I invoke this function, does name exist? I pass in array of name, should be names, and some name. And if I execute it, see we have 0 right here. So I can even do I, and then name, just so you can see what that is. Actually say like index and name. So initially the I0 right here. So that's coming into here, I0. The value at names at index 0 is Tom. Then it comes here, it says if Tom equals Meryl, return true. That's not true, so it just skips that and goes back up, increments I by 1. So index is 1. The value at index 1 is Gus. Is that true? Nope, it's not true, so it skips this part, goes back up, increments I by 1. So now I equals 2. Right here, index is 2. The name is Meryl. Does Meryl equal name, which is Meryl? That is true, so then it returns true right there. There's also while loops. We can get into that. It's essentially the same thing. We can duplicate this. Just requires a little more work, or actually some people like it. If I delete that and say let I equal 0, and say, well, I is less than names.length. And this is where I could do that if statement. If names at I equals, yeah, it should be a triple equals just for consistency. So this is a compare operator, double equals or triple equals, equals name, return true. And then if it doesn't return true, I want to increment I by 1 plus equals 1. And I can also console log that part as well. And I can return false. So if it goes through the while loop and never finds a name, it's just going to break out of it because I is going to continue to increment. And when I equals the name.length, it's not going to execute any of this code. It's going to jump out of it and return down here. So if I can run this again, what happened? Index 0, name Tom. That's not, oh, this should be down here. If I execute it, same output. It returns true because Meryl exists. And if I put in some other name that didn't exist, like Bob, it'll return false. So it goes all the way up to the length of it, or to the index, and it's going to return false. What questions do you have about for loops or while loops?
If you wanted to do that to an object list, would you just use a for loop to iterate through the objects?
So when you say an object list,
Yeah, so let's say you have those names as values in an object,
so
and you
like,
wanted to see, let's say you wanted to see if,
so what would that data type look like? So I have an object, right?
so you have Tom on there, and you wanna loop through each value to see if Tom is one of them.
So if Tom is a value of any of these keys,
Yes.
right? So you can do that. So we have some object and say for, or function, let's do an arrow function, let find key value. I'm going to say an object and a name. And I could say for, so looping through objects is a little different. You say let key, so let a variable called key, and this is going to represent the key in the object. So let key in object, and this should be called the same thing. So this is again the parameter. I can say some object. I can say if some object key equals name, return true, else, or I can even just say just return false because I break through that. So I can actually console log the key as well as the value, some object. So if I invoke this function and pass in some object as well as Tom, it's going to find, oh, what happened? Where did that go? Line 86. Oh, so I forgot to actually make it a fat arrow function. I forgot that angle bracket to make it a function. And there we go. I've got first name, Tom, and it finds it, it's true. But if I put in some other name, like George, it'll loop through the entire thing and return false. So I'm key. Value. So there's the key. The key is the first name. The value is Tom, or is Tom. Key title. Value is instructor. The key is time. The value is 1300. So George is not found. It loops through that entire object. Never hits. This never evaluates to true. So it never hits this piece of code. Loops through the entire thing, and so it breaks out of that for loop and then just returns. So it comes down here, executes this. Once this is done executing, then it returns false. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right. That is enough review for right now. Let's jump into today's session 2. And formatting and clean code. This is very important. I know someone mentioned on Tuesday saying, hey, can I write the entire function on one line and the computer would the computer read it and execute it? And the answer is yes. But that's cool. But in reality, you're not writing code just for the computer. You're also writing code for other developers, including yourself. So solving the problem, if you write a function that solves the problem all on one line, like literally just the entire function declaration and all that on one line, and you solve it like that, no one's going to look at that and be like, oh yeah, like that person is a good developer, because yeah, they're not even going to look at your code. They're going to be like, that is just a hunk of mess that I can't even read. So the whole purpose is like formatting your code. It's like speaking in a non-stop run-on sentence versus having punctuation, paragraphs, and just like very eloquent sentence structure. It's kind of like writing a nice, 5-paragraph essay with proper punctuation and sentence structure. So proper formatting of code is also very important. Also, proper variable names. I know I've been naming parameters as num1, num2, but as you get into more unique types of data you're inputting into like functions, you should be very descriptive in the type of data that a function is expecting. That helps with other people looking at your code and be like, oh, I know what that variable is. That variable is an array of names. It's literally called ARR of names. So I'm guessing it's an array of names of sort. So the names of variables should make it clear what the data represents. Also, use camel case when naming variables. And we also talk about proper indentation and spacing. So let's jump into that. All right. So formatting. So a lot of IDEs, like what we're using right now in REPL, it kind of formats things for you by doing proper indentation and all that. But it can get really messy really quickly when you start editing your code. And so you should try to ensure that you have proper indentation and proper variable naming. So for example, if I'm declaring someone's first name, I'm not going to call it like A equals Tom, because A is not very descriptive. Like if I came along and just looked at what the value of A should be, I don't know what that data should represent. So we should probably call it like first name. And variables, specifically in JavaScript, naming follows the camel case ethos, I would say. Where to go? Camel case, which is the first letter. So if you're naming a variable or a function that has multiple words in it, the very first word should be a lowercase. So like first should be all lowercase, and then followed by all the other words starting with a capital letter. So like first, and with no spaces in between all the words. So it's like first is all lowercase, followed by capital N in name. So, and then everything else is lowercase. And so this is like a descriptive variable name. So if someone came along and was like, what does that variable name represent? And the variable name is first name. I'm guessing that the data that goes into that variable is probably someone's first name. Does anybody have any questions about kind of that naming convention? Other languages do it differently, like in Python, which is another language. They do what is known as snake case. So it would be like, instead of first name, it would be everything is lowercase followed by underscore separating the words. So that's how it's done in Python. But in JavaScript, we subscribe to the camel case convention. Let last name. And we want spaces in between equal signs, or between variables and equal signs, as well as just declaring variable declaration. You want spaces in between. So we have first name followed by a space, followed by an equal sign, followed by a space. you rarely ever want to do like stuff like that. You want things to be easily readable, like so. Likewise with functions. So when you declare a function, you want a space, retirement, or you can say like retire age. So this might say like the age, I'll do age to retirement. So that's pretty descriptive. Like this function is probably going to has something to do with age to retirement. And then your parameter should be just as descriptive of should describe the data that's being input into that parameter. So I can say like age or initial age. So like my like initial age and age to retirement. So perhaps I don't want to retire at 67. Perhaps I want to retire at 55. And my initial age is like 34. So I can calculate how many years I have until I want to retire. You don't need a space in between the function name and that parentheses, but you do need a space between the parentheses and the opening bracket. And now notice how the function, right here, it's indented. It should be about 2 spaces indented all the time. So I can say let retirement age or years to retire and say age to retirement minus initial age and then return years to retire. So notice how we have spaces in between all the values and any operations. So that's like proper formatting. You could write this all on one line of code, but it would not be pretty. And I wouldn't know what it means. Like you can literally do all this on one line, but that's not what it's not what clean code and proper formatting should be. Does anybody have any questions about proper formatting and just clean code? I'll slack out some conventions. W3 Schools has a pretty good JavaScript convention that is good enough to follow. Where to go? I'll slack that out right now. In code. So yeah, it's a JavaScript style guide. Yeah. So what questions do you have about formatting and all that? Nothing?
Do you say files or file names? Do you use camel case as well?
I actually don't know. I think you do for file names. What do you, Gus? What do you think? I don't remember specific. It depends on the language.
Yeah, I usually switch it up depending on whether I'm doing Python or JavaScript or something else. I think JavaScript, I've been capitalizing every word, but I don't know if that's correct or not.
Yeah. I mean, I know I usually use camel case or snake case. Yeah, it depends. Like, honestly, I use JavaScript and Python a lot, and I kind of conflate the two. But I never really capitalize any files, like the initial word. I never have it capitalized. Now, if we get into React, that's a different case, but yeah. All right. So with that, let's talk about problem solving again, because I saw a bunch of people talking on Slack, and as I said before, problem solving is the most difficult part. This is kind of why you're here, is so learning the syntax is one thing, but actually learning how to solve the problems is a totally different beast. And is what is the most difficult part of actually programming or learning code is how to solve problems. So let's run through some problems from the other night. Does anybody want to run through anything specifically? Let's run through like the first name. I ran through the first name one. Let's run through the convert hours. Where is it? Yep. No, where's that one? Back to classroom. Convert hours to minutes. So you can unsubmit it and edit it. So when you initially came upon this problem, I'm going to look at the how to think like a programmer slide and kind of walk through a couple of how I would solve this. So understand what the problem is asking you to do. How many inputs are required? What data types are inputted? And what's the expected output? What kind like data type? So if I'm looking at this specific problem, it says write a function that takes in a number, so a number of minutes, and returns a string. So initial input is a number, and output should be a string. Okay, that's all right. I'm starting to understand what's going on now, and it gives me some examples. So an input of 125 minutes stands for 2 hours and 5 minutes. Okay, and now in 75 minutes, I'm saying it says 1 hour and 15 minutes. So I'm seeing like a difference there. So I'm seeing hours and hour. I'm seeing plural and singular. So I might have to account for that in some capacity. I'm seeing 55 minutes equals 0 hours. Okay, so that's a plural. And 55 minutes. So these are all plural. That should be pretty simple. Like, all right, there's nothing I have to do there. Then 121 minutes, 2 hours, so plural, and 1 minute. So I'm also dealing with plurals here. So, all right. So now it's like, okay, give examples of inputs and expected outputs. That's what we do right here when we give out examples. We give you an example input and output. All right. It said, do I need any other variables? And what I mean by that is, do I have to declare any other variables in here that I can use throughout the function or throughout the program? So do I need an array? Can I do something with an object? Can I make an object out of some of the data that's put in there? Right now, I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary because I'm literally just taking numbers, converting it to, it's just like a math operation. So I don't need to store any data in an array or object or anything like that. So break down the problem into smaller problems. This is the hardest part to grasp, I think, when first starting to learn the program. So I've got this big problem. I have to convert number into minutes, and I have to like change it into like some, a sentence essentially. I have to turn like a number into a sentence, like a readable sentence. So it's kind of daunting. So what I'm going to do is, all right, what I do know that we're given minutes, and I have to convert it to hours and minutes. But let's just first convert, let's see how many hours are in the minutes given. So I'm going to say, find the number of hours in the total minutes. And then I can find out the total minutes in the remaining hours. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to say let hours, because I want to declare a variable that's very descriptive of what it is. And I know there's 60 minutes in an hour. So I can say minutes divided by 60. And let's just, I'm going to run that. I'm going to console log it to see what that looks like. I'm going to console log the hours. I'm going to just use this as an initial input. And I'm going to execute that. So I'm going to run it. And down here, you can see I'm getting like 2.08333 hours. Okay. But I need it to be a single 2. Does everyone, what questions do you have about kind of that process right now, about that kind of thought process? All right. So I've got 2.0833335, whatever, but I need to get it down to just a single 2. So I'm brand new developer. I'm learning to code. I don't know how. Like how do I round? Like if I round that, can I round that up? Can I round it down? So I'm going to use Google. Google's a great resource. I use it all the time. I like that. It's like not like I'm not the smartest person in the world, like in the room. I'm just the best Googler. That's why people come to me. I don't know the answers. They ask me a question. I pass it off to Google, and then I give them the answer, and they think I'm smart. So I can say how to round in JavaScript. So I'm just going to click that. And I see there's some good resources. W3 Schools is a really good resource. Mozilla Developer Network, MDN. This is like the end-all, be-all of JavaScript right here. But W3 Schools is really good. Geeks for Geeks is also they've got good resources. But I'm going to click on W3 Schools right now. And it says JavaScript round method. And it gives me a little example of how I can use it. So round a number to the nearest integer. I can try it myself just to try it out. All right, it says 2.5. I say try it. It says 3. Okay, so I guess it rounds 2.5 up to 3. So I'm going to see if I can use math.round. So I'm literally just going to copy this over here to use it as a reference, because math.round. So I can pass this number, the hours, into the math.round. So I can say like let rounded hours equals math.round and pass it in the hours. Whoop. And now I can console log the rounded hours and see what that looks like. All right, cool. I've got 2 now. So I've got my hours. So I took this complex problem that I have to convert hours to minutes and output a string that says how many hours and minutes are left. And now I've got one element. I've got 2. I've got 2 hours. So I've got that part down. So I've got the rounded hours. And it looks like I can actually make this a little more efficient. Well, I'll get to that later. But now, how do I get the number of minutes remaining? Oh no, I forgot how to do that. So
The modulus.
I can do modulus. So when you say I can do modulus, walk me through how do I write that?
So you could let minutes, you're gonna use a % sign.
Okay, so let minutes what?
Minutes %, 60, I believe.
What does this return?
It's the remainder.
So, but I'm not, so I'm declaring, so should it be let minutes equals minutes?
I'm not sure if you have to call it something else because we already have minutes in parentheses above.
So that's actually okay. We can reassign a value to minutes. But in order to do that, what does it say? It says minutes has already been declared, but I don't have to redeclare it. I can just reassign it. So if I'm taking this value and reassigning it. So let's just console log minutes then. So we have 5. Is 5 correct? Awesome. Cool. So now we have minutes. So if I just say return, I can do a string. So hours plus a string of hours and plus minutes plus minutes. So I've got this initial input of 125 minutes, and I want it to output look like something like that. So if I run that, oh no, hours. So I think I messed up. I should have used rounded hours. All right, so if I run that, great, cool. I've got a string that says 2 hours and 5 minutes. Awesome. So cool. This one specifically has some spec tests or test specs. Oh no, I failed some tests. Let's add some other inputs. Let's use 125. So it looks like it says, or let's use 75. It says 1 hours and 15 minutes. So now I'm like, oh no, that's not right. I've got plural, but it's actually should be singular. So, okay, that's easy. We're starting to learn how to code. I can use some if statements. I can say if and have a condition if, hours or rounded hours is greater than 1. I want to return this value. Else, I'm going to essentially return the same thing. Whoop. But instead of hours, I'm going to use a singular. So I ran it. I see I've got 1 hour and 15 minutes. Awesome. Let's try this test case. All right, 55. Let's run it. Did I just try that one? One hour. What's going on? So I've got 2 test cases. Why isn't 55 executing? Oh, so if I do 55 minutes and run it, it still says 1 hour and uh-oh, what's going on here? So maybe math.round isn't the right one. Let's actually test this rounded hours. So it's console log hours and rounded hours. So initial hours is 0.916666. And when I round it, it rounds up. But I want to round it down. Uh-oh. That's not good. All right, how to round down in JavaScript. So it looks like W3 Schools has another one, math.floor. All right, so let's go ahead and check out math.floor. So instead of math.round, I can use math.floor. And let's run that. Oh, okay, so math.floor rounds whatever value down to the nearest whole integer. All right, so I've got that. Let's run some test specs. All right, I'm still not passing all of them. All right, so because 0, so it should be 0 hours, so it needs to be plural. All right, so let's run another if statement. I'm gonna actually do this one here, so I can do else if rounded hours equals 0, pretty much the same thing, but do that. All right. 0 hours. Now let's run some tests. Okay, now I'm passing 3 tests. Now I'm gonna have to pass 1 more. All right. Now here, you can test 121, 2 hours and 1 minute. So this should be singular. All right. So I'm just gonna do another if statement. It says if minutes equals 1, let's do pretty much that same thing. And singular. Let's see if this works. Run it, 1 hour, 2 hours and 1 minute. Oh, it's still doing it. So if minutes, oh, it's right up here. So it depends on where it's located at. I can do a conditional statement, and minutes is greater than 1. So if I run that, there we go. If I run those tests, all of them passed. So I used a logical and operator. So if rounded hours is greater than 1, great. And if minutes is greater than 1, cool. So I pass all the test specs. I can make this a little more efficient by, instead of having a rounded hours, I can just do math.floor like that. I can get rid of that. Oop. Instead of using rounded hours. Oh, shoot. I can just do hours. Everything's still passing. Close it, submit it. All tests passed. Great. See the model solution. Something similar to that. It looks like the model solution, they use string interpolation. And I probably should have used comparison operators or triple equals. Cool. Does anybody have any questions about kind of how to logically break down that problem?
Yes.
Yep.
I had a question. Would it have worked if you would have just made the conditional statement for it being equal to 1, and then it'd be singular, and then everything else is not equal to 1? So that'd be the else statement, right? So if it's equal to 1, then it's the singular hour, and then else, then it's going to be plural because it's either equal to 1 or not.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways to do this. There's definitely ways you can switch it around or do like, yeah, essentially, yes, yes, you are correct. So, and that's another point. There's more than one way to solve a problem. I guarantee you I can look at everyone's code in here that solved this or made an attempt at this, and each and one of you would have solved it differently and still got the correct answer. What other questions do you have? Just beating on the drum. All right. No questions? Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break or 11-minute break. And we can come back. Do you guys want me to go through a couple more?
Tom, can we try going over the hot potato challenge?
Uh-oh. I don't think I've done that one yet. Let's look at it. So Bootcamp Prep. Which one is that? Hot potato. Right here. Yeah. Your teacher. So actually, let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and look at this one.